Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. Give this video a like. We appreciate it.
Podcast below in the description. Get on that as well.
All right, John. Dan Orlovsky on the 49ers and Carson Wentz. Thanks to NinersWebZone.com. They transcribed it. I read it. This is what he said. It makes them better. If the Bears were to get Carson Wentz, it would make them better. No longer can you ask yourself, if we get this quarterback and he plays as good as he can, are we better? You have to ask yourself, if we get this quarterback with this roster and he plays as good as he can we win a Super Bowl? Legit? The two teams that are in the conversation that fit that mold are the Colts and the 49ers. So again, he's saying, Bears, he makes it better. If the Niners get Wentz or the Colts get Wentz, it makes them a Super Bowl contender. And the very important caveat is if he plays to his full capabilities.
Yeah, to me, there's an element with Carson Wentz for a guy, let's not forget Carson Wentz is not 22 years old. He was old when he got in the league. He's 28, 29 years old now. He's been in the league 5+ years. I think he's kind of being talked about like a draft prospect. And I do it. I'm just as guilty. And part of it is just because, how could a guy that talented be that shitty? But the fact was he couldn't have been much worse last year. It was really bad. And I know a lot of people there, and they simply said, when Jalen came in, a lot of his defenders, and Orlovsky was one of those guys. And you and I were big Carson Wentz guys.
Sure.
And it was, his supporting cast, his supporting cast. And then Jalen comes in, and they were just much more explosive on offense with the same guys. And you just wonder, is it just a simple fact that Carson lost his confidence? Is he just was he overrated is the wrong word, but is he just going to be like this moving forward? I think he's very, very polarizing, and he's got the elephant in the room of just a massive contract. I think his contract was a lot smaller or hadn't been extended or whatever now. 100% people would take big swings on him. But guy, like Jameis Winston, let's say the Saints let him walk. I think a lot of teams would be very, very interested because he's cheap. Part of Carson Wentz is we want to take on all this money because the moment Belichick's thing always with Brady was he would never pay a guy in his locker room more than Tom. And Tom was always taking discounts because, how are you going to make more than Tom? He's the fucking greatest quarterback of all time. And this was starting back in the late 2000s, let alone what it became over the decade.
Right.
The moment you bring Carson Wentz in your locker room, if you're the Colts or the Niners, he makes so much more than George Kittle or even when Fred Warner gets this guy makes double what you make, George. Even though last year when you got injured, your foot was broken and Jimmy's up there taking notes, you begged to come back. You're the heart and soul of our team. Fred Warner, you too. You've been making $600,000 for 3 straight years. And Carson Wentz now, welcome to the show. That is something that you have to factor in if you're the Niners. The Colts, I think, is a little bit of a unique situation, but I think there are some parallels there too.
Yeah, I think part of the reason the Colts are unique, right, is that they have not reached the heights that the Niners have. Some of their core players, like DeForest Buckner's only been there a year. They're just at a different point maybe in their development.
Jonathan Taylor was a rookie last year that looks like he's going to be a star. Right?
Yeah, they don't have yes. So let me go back to the original Orlovsky point. If Carson Wentz plays as well as he's played at times, the Niners would be a Super Bowl contender. I agree. I don't think there's any question about that, right?
If they get 2017 Carson Wentz on this Niners team, they are a lock playoff team.
Yes. Yep. And they're a Super Bowl contender. The question is not if you knew you were getting that, they wouldn't be trading him. If you knew that you were getting that, you'd trade 2 ones. If you knew you were getting that, you'd worry a little bit less about him being the highest paid player in your locker room, or a little bit less about the fact that it doesn't seem like he really has the stomach for competing with other quarterbacks. You'd worry less about that stuff because on the field it would pay off. The question is not what is he at his height. The question is, are you willing to take on the financial risk, the risk to your locker room, the risk and compensation you'll have to pay the Eagles to bring in a guy that at this point it feels like it might be 50-50 that he's just a 58% passer for the rest of his career and gets hurt.
And is expensive.
It's not about what is he at his peak. At his peak, he is an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
And if he's an MVP candidate, you're a Super Bowl contender. If
I had told you,
confident are you to make that bet when the risk factors are several?
If I had told you that Carson Wentz was like J.J. Watt was cut, we'd be like, the Niners would be crazy to not fly him out here, right? To not sit down with him. Correct? Would you agree with that? If he was just cut
Absolutely.
and anyone could sign him. Yeah. Wouldn't you say if Carson Wentz was cut like J.J. Watt, there would be half the league, maybe not that, but like legitimate 10 teams would be all over him, for the right price or whatever, but bringing him in, talking to him, it is way more complicated given the situation. And I think when you look at the Niners' recent history, even if it costs like 2 to get him, you would say for a guy that's much riskier than he is a sure thing. Like I would say right now in his ratio of good player / risky, not good, it's probably like 30 good, 70 all the craziness. And I don't think the Niners are at the point to risk it. I also think when you keep reading these reports about the Colts, it feels like it's not worth it for them. They've spent Chris Ballard, most hyped GM candidate in like the history of GM candidates, finally gets a GM job. We're like, damn, this guy's pretty good. It's like good players at every position. You're like, they don't even have a quarterback and they're winning 10, 11 games. They get Phillip Rivers, who's like 45, who's arm shot, and they win 11. You're like, God, if they just had a top 15 quarterback, if I gave them like Kirk Cousins, I'd be like, they win 13 games. Is it worth risking everything you've built? And I know it sucks, and they probably don't want to do a bridge, but there's a chance that Carson is quote unquote a bridge, and it's a shitty bridge that burns down, and you just waste a couple years. And the Niners, they've waited too long, and they had a situation with Jimmy where we'll find out if they got, if he's not on the team anymore. It's like they kind of got burned, they kind of didn't, but they made a bet, and they got a good year out of it and 2 bad years. But it's like I think you just want to feel more of a sure thing. And to me, Carson Wentz would be like, he'd be like a stock that, it could quadruple, but it also could go to 0 fast. Like, honestly, guy, would it shock you if Carson goes to a new team and halfway through the first year? And listen, I think there is a chance that he turns his career around, but we also see guys plummet the other way, and he does have that potential a little bit because of the guy, right?
Yep. The counter to everything we've said is you don't get opportunities to get potential MVP level quarterbacks for pennies on the dollar. Those opportunities don't come along.
But it's not pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. We don't know. If you said it was 2 twos, that's not pennies on the dollar, but it's good value.
But I think you have to factor in getting the contract as well.
Exactly. So when you said we're talking about him like a draft prospect, you shouldn't have this many questions about a player you're going to pay $34 million next year about. Like, that's what makes it terrifying, especially when, again, this is where you go back to the Niners are not in the situation the Colts are in. We can talk about how good is Jimmy, whatever, and that Jimmy didn't look good before he got hurt and that Jimmy's been a hurt player. But I don't know that I don't have more questions. I got as many questions, maybe more about Carson than I do about Jimmy. So it's not like let's push Jimmy aside for a guy that let's move on because we know we've got a solid thing here. It's far from a solid thing. In fact, it might be less solid, and it's inarguably more costly than Garoppolo. Without any history of physical durability, it's a consistent physical durability. I mean, it's a lot of the same
it could derail your culture of what you've built.
Yeah. So, yes, he could. If he were at his best, he'd make you a Super Bowl contender. If you were at his best, you'd trade for him yesterday. They wouldn't be trading him.
I completely agree.
But that's why we talk about this all the time, is because that's the carrot.
I think he's one of the more however this plays out with him, just even these next 2 years, if he goes to the Bears, if he goes to the Colts, I would say he's going to be one of the more polarizing players. Like, he's going to lead conversations next year. That's the other thing, right? Let's say the Niners did pull the trigger. And let's say they got him pennies on the dollar. Let's say it cost a second this year and like a third next year. So you'd be like, gosh, the magnifying glass, and I'd say the pressure cooker of that story with the fans. If it happened tomorrow, Carson Wentz was traded to the Niners, how often would me and you talk about Carson Wentz? I mean, we'd be talking nonstop for 6 months.
We talk about him
until
almost every day as it is.
I know. And just all the different angle. There would be a pressure there that comes along with it. Like, if the Niners traded 3 1s for Deshaun Watson, to me, it'd be like a celebration, right? They finally got their franchise quarterback. It paid a lot, but they got this guy. It would be a lot positive. People would be on every different side of the fence, and the pressure on him, like every play, because this became with Jimmy Garoppolo. Every throw would be magnified. Every practice, the buzz coming out would be. Every comment from Kyle, he'd be like, "Does Kyle not already like him, or does Kyle like him too much?" And same with the Colts, same with the Bears. The Bears a little unique situation because everyone's kind of desperate. But the Colts and the Niners have, like, Frank and Ballard ain't going anywhere, and clearly Lynch and Kyle have, like, beside like Andy Reid, the longest contracts in the league.
I think it's a great point, because this idea, if you think Carson's getting a fresh start if he's on a new team, I don't think he is. Now, it might feel like one to him, but every storyline that's existed in Philly is going to follow him to his new place.
Well, right? I would imagine.
And week 1, if he's 15 of 30, it's going to be 0 to 60.
Well, if the preseason games, let's just say there's a couple this year, typically on a preseason schedule, like Al Michaels does a couple. They just kind of warm-ups. Monday Night Football does a couple. I would bet my life that Carson Wentz's team would be tabbed for a primetime preseason game, right? It'd just be an easy one. It'd be a BP fastball for the networks.
Yep.
Because that's, I'd say, even more than Brady, because, like, there's no polarization anymore with Brady. He just went. Or even Rodgers. Like, it's like, is this guy good? I'd say the Rams and Stafford would be in that, like, just because it's like it's an unknown.
Yeah, I mean, those would be the biggest storylines of the year right now if we started setting up August storylines, right?
Wentz and his new team and Stafford and the Rams.
Yeah. Now, again, part of it, we'll see what
Deshaun could go to the night.
Yeah. Right, that whole thing. But
yeah, Russell traded.
Yeah.
We got potential.
Ben
I don't mind some of these things happening.
Big Ben on the Patriots. Could you imagine?
If I was
Ben on the Patriots,
I'd pay for that guy. That'd be cool. That'd be